to everyone out there. Happy Labor Day weekend. Today on the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour, we are going to make coffee cocktails. So there are a lot of little things I want to talk about aside from just making the cocktails. So we'll get right into it. I am a huge coffee fan. By no means am I a coffee expert or a coffee snob. I just really, really love coffee. I have tried a lot of different coffees from around the world. I think it's fascinating to take some time and learn how people drink coffee in other cultures. If you have the time, I highly encourage you to investigate over a morning cup of joe. I lived in Costa Rica for a really long time. They have fantastic coffee, but in my opinion, not necessarily the best brewing methods. So today I'm making 3 separate cocktails with 3 different coffees. And I wanted to discuss those coffees with you guys and then create the cocktails. So one of the coffees I'll be using is local to Austin, Texas. And the roaster or the coffee company is called Progress. And the blend that I'm using today is the Haywood Blend. Haywood is also a hotel in Austin, and this is actually the blend that you would drink if you were in their hotel. It's their custom blend. It's really nice. The tasting notes that they have written out for it are light cocoa and citrus with a velvety dark berry finish. It's a medium roast. Coffee is very similar to trying to describe wines. There's a lot of terroir that goes into growing up the coffee. Coffees grow in different altitudes, in different qualities of light or shade, as well as different regions of the world. Out of all the coffees you can get, there's only one place in the US that can grow coffee naturally, and that's in Hawaii. I'm not a huge fan of Hawaiian coffee, but that's just because it tends to be really fruity. Sometimes has these like overly ripe banana kind of aroma to it, which is not my personal preference. I'm very geared towards like Italian coffees, like nutty and chocolate and toastier flavors, but it is still a good coffee. One of the other coffees we'll be using is more commercially available. It's definitely an Italian brand. It's called Italy. It is one of the top most exported brands from Italy, the other one being Lavazza. I like both brands. They're very different, but Italy tends to have, because I have the dark roast that I use in my mocha pot, Italy tends to have toasted bread and dark chocolate notes that I really like, so it's really, really nice for espresso. And then the last coffee I'll be using, I don't actually have like a package to show you guys because I just had the loose beans in a container from a while back, and it's an Ethiopian coffee that I received from Utopia Roasters, which is in Virginia. And Ethiopian coffee is just really, really interesting. If you ever get it, it's really nice and glossy looking, and it has these really subtle floral notes, has some fruity tones, and at the same time, it has these like wood notes to it. So it's a really interesting coffee, and it's also one of the most interesting coffees, culturally speaking, in my opinion. The way they serve coffee in Ethiopia, which I wish I could do for you guys, is they take the coffee green, roast it to order on what looks like a wok in front of their guests when you visit someone's home. And then once they brew it, they serve it to you with a pat of spiced butter floating on top and popcorn. It is super weird, at least if you're used to the way we drink coffee, but it is super tasty as well. It's a little more savory, and it's just fun because it has snacks. So how could you not love that? But as far as our cocktails today, I wanted to start off with the Ryzen Grind. The Ryzen Grind is a equal parts cocktail. Other equal parts cocktails out there that most people are familiar with would be the Negroni or perhaps a paper plane. Equal parts cocktails are notoriously hard to make because, as the name of the category describes, they're all in equal parts. So if you're using 3 ingredients, they're all in the same measure. It is really difficult to find ingredients that all mesh together in perfect harmony at the same amount. That's why you see a lot of cocktail recipes that have a ½ ounce of something, 2 ounces of this, 3/4 ounce of a different ingredient. But equal parts cocktails are kind of like the unicorns out there within the cocktail world. So I spent some time and I was determined to find a equal parts coffee cocktail that I could make. And I came up with what I call the Ryzen Grind. So this will be a stirred cocktail. A lot of equal parts cocktails are, but not necessarily all of them. And we're going to use 1 ounce of gin. using my Sipsmith for this. I do have some other gins, but Sipsmith is definitely the favorite one that I have here with me in my bar. So 1 ounce of that. And we're going to use an ounce of limoncello. Now, citrus notes in coffee are not always a really common pairing, but if you do find them, it's usually orange in coffee because that really brings forth the thoughts of like fall and holidays because you have orange, spice, and they're warmer. Lemon tends to be brighter, so not a lot of people associate it with coffee, but it is a beautiful pairing. So we're going to use 1 ounce of limoncello. And it's important to realize that all of the ingredients in this cocktail are easy to find and should be easy to source, but they're very varied within their category. So it'll allow you the ability to recreate this cocktail 1,000 times over and have varying flavor profiles every time. If you change just the gin and then maintain the same coffee and limoncello, you can choose a gin that is citrusy, floral, juniper forward. You could even go as far as using a Geneva or an Old Tom gin. So you could play with that element. Or if you wanted to play with limoncello, you could make your own homemade limoncello. Not all limoncellos are created equal, although they are a liqueur. Some are sweeter than others. And then as far as the coffee goes, whatever brand you enjoy at home will also change depending on your brewing method. So for this particular one, I'm using the Haywood Blend, I think. No, sorry. I'm using the Utopia Ethiopian coffee. So I'm going to use 1 ounce of this as well. And I did this in a French press. I tried this cocktail with this coffee. I have a lot of methods to make coffee. I used a mocha pot, which is kind of like a stovetop espresso machine. I have a French press. I have a coffee siphon. I have a regular drip coffee pot, a Vietnamese fin. I found that the French press was really nice for this because it allowed you to extract some of the notes that you can't get with cold brew, but not too many of the acidic or heavier notes that you can find in Ethiopian coffee if you use a pressurized system. So I enjoyed this with the French press, but by all means, please experiment with whatever method you have available at home. So we're gonna put ice in our mixing glass. And then we're gonna stir. And it's been a while. I know we've done maybe a handful of stirred cocktails, but if you haven't tuned into all of the different classes I've done since the pandemic started here in Texas, if you are for the first time stirring a cocktail and you have a cocktail spoon, you want the dished part of your spoon on the outside touching the inside of your mixing glass, and then you want to try and rotate that by pressing that against the inside. So you insert your spoon, and you're just going to try and move your wrist. You want to try to avoid this as much as possible. Your arm will get really tired really quickly. This is a really good wrist workout. You have carpal tunnel. This is also a really good little stretch for all the little tendons in your hand. And everybody's different about how many times you stir a cocktail. It depends a lot on your ingredients. It also depends a lot on how diluted you want it. If you're serving it over ice, you can continue to dilute the cocktail, or if you're serving it up without ice. But I like to mix it. Some people do it by time, by song, or by amount of revolutions or stirs. I try to do it for about 20 seconds, at least for this particular cocktail. You want to make sure your glass is nice and cold. So if I try to touch it from time to time to just kind of gauge what temperature my cocktail is at. So for this cocktail, we are going to serve it over ice, although it does serve really well up as well if you have like a little scoop. Then I'm going to strain this with my julep strainer. And while this cocktail doesn't need a garnish, not all cocktails need a garnish. Sometimes they add to the cocktail, sometimes they're just there for show. But I thought this cocktail did really nice with a dehydrated lemon peel sitting in the cocktail, because then it slowly continues to infuse the cocktail and accentuate that limoncello. So this is the Ryzen Grind. Cheers, guys. So this is really, really nice. I love the fact that all three ingredients shine individually, but also together. You can taste the gin, you can taste the limoncello, and you can taste the coffee. And like I said, if you change coffees, the cocktail will change. If you change brewing methods of your coffee, the cocktail will change. Always in good ways, it will just be different. So my favorite thing about Equal Parts cocktails are they're very easy to remember the recipes to, even if you've been drinking a little too much all day. And then you can just kind of play around by swapping out one thing, as a lot of people like to call plug and play, where you just put in something new and see what happens. You could also try this with a different spirit if you didn't want to use gin. You could use vodka, you could use tequila, you could use whiskey. I just really preferred this with the gin. I thought it was really nice. The botanicals really pull out some of those flavors of the coffee that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on its own, but it is really, really nice. So that is the Ryzen Grind. If for some reason y'all have any questions, please feel free to drop them on the video that is streaming currently on Facebook. I'm trying to keep tabs on it on my phone. Also, if you think of something later or you're making this at home, have any issues whatsoever, please reach out through Messenger or through Instagram or however you feel like you can get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to answer your question. This is what I do all day, make cocktails and help you make better cocktails. So our next cocktail is going to be called Cool Beans. And this one is going to be made with the Haywood Blend from Austin. And Austin's just kind of a neat little city. There's a saying that there's Texas and then there's Austin. Austin is our capital, but it's also its own little unique place. If you could take like Denver, Colorado, and San Francisco, California, and Texas, and put them all into one city with a lot of multicultural influence, then that would be Austin. Great music scene, lots of really interesting things going on in the food and beverage industry, and there's just a lot of creative people out there. It's a really neat little town. So for this, I wanted to call it Cool Beans, use an Austin-based coffee, and just put a bunch of stuff together to make a really tasty drink. So we're going to start with 1 ounce of bourbon. And I'm not brand specific. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I just use things that I enjoy. Feel free to use whatever you have on hand at home. And if for some reason the flavor profile isn't just meshing for you quite well, then let me know what you have and I'll tell you what might have been a better option. So we're going to use 1 ounce of bourbon. This is a small batch bourbon that I'm using. You can use any kind of bourbon. We're going to use 3/4 ounce of Aperol. Aperol, if you don't know, is a liqueur from Italy that is made from Valencia oranges from Spain. It's in the bitter liqueur category, so it is sweet and citrusy, but it has some strong bitter notes to it that I find really pleasant. We're also going to use a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice, back to that whole lemon concept with coffee. I played around trying to design cocktails for this class, and lemon and coffee just seem to be like my flavor preference at the moment. I'm going to use 1.25 ounces of that Haywood Blend. And like I said, this is what they serve at the hotel. So if you happen to be in Austin, you can definitely pick up a coffee there. Or if you want to, Progress Coffee, I believe, sells it online, and you can have some shipped to your house and make the cocktail exactly the way I'm making it today. So 1.25 ounces of that. And then we're going to add some bitters. We're going to add 1 dash of orange bitters. And I always tell people, have intention when you do that dash if you're not using a special type of dash or bottle. Dashes and drops are all different depending on the dispenser in the bottle. So sometimes you might find that one brand comes out with a bigger drop or dash than another. You can control that if you want to, getting special dasher or dropper tops, but I like doing it with just the ones they have for the most part. And then we're going to also add 1 dash of Acios or aromatic bitters. So we've added that in there. And 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. So of our cocktails, believe it or not, this one's going to be one of the sweeter ones. And it doesn't have a whole lot of sugar. The Aperol is a liqueur, but the sugar notes aren't incredibly intense. But there's just something about the way it plays with this coffee that it just comes out a lot sweeter than the other cocktails. Not to say that it's a sweet cocktail at all. I wanted to really steer away. From making overly sweet coffee cocktails because I feel like that gets done a lot. I feel like espresso martinis and sweet coffee cocktails are all I my goal is to open that. So ice in the shaker, and then we're going to shake for about 10 to 15 seconds. So if you happen to make quite a bit of coffee at home, I would recommend, if you happen to have extra coffee, I like to put it in the coffee ice cubes that I can then put in my coffee cocktails so that if they continue to dilute, they just get more coffee. So I actually have some coffee ice cubes that I've made. I'm going to put some in a little coffee cup. Then I'm going to strain this cocktail directly over these ice cubes. And also because this cocktail has like that Aperol, it gets this kind of dark auburn color to it when the Aperol combines with the coffee. So that contrast of the cocktail color and the coffee cubes is gorgeous. I'm going to bring it over and so you guys can kind of see. Also, a really interesting fact, if you take coffee and simple syrup or some kind of sweetener and shake it, it will be foamy. There are these really interesting chemical properties in coffee that tend to make it thicken when it gets shaken with certain things. I can't quite recall the name right now. It is super scientific. I will look it up if anyone's interested, or you can bypass me and Google it. But it is some really fancy scientific word. But all you need to know is that if you shake them together, it makes it foamy. So you don't actually have to put in any kind of dairy product or foamed latte art or anything else to make a like frothy type of coffee cocktail. You can do it, as you can see, without. So if you also take just coffee and a simple syrup and shake it, that is called a shakerado, which is a type of coffee beverage that some people also add alcohol to. So then you can do coffee, the alcohol of your choice, a little simple syrup, shake it, pour it over ice, and then you have your boozy shakerado. So for our last cocktail, I know we're kind of breezing through these a little fast. I might have had some coffee before this class. But the last cocktail that I wanted to make for you guys today, I'm calling the rabbit hole. I'm calling it that for a lot of reasons. So I'm calling it the rabbit hole because I went down a rabbit hole trying to find flavors that went together and I could create a coffee cocktail that had a lot going on, but still tasted like the best cold cup of dark coffee, like dark black coffee that you could have. And then the ingredients that I started blending together didn't really seem like they would go together, but they were things that two of friends that I have really liked individually and at the same time. And I tend to go into these conversations with both of these friends that lead to these very large, windy, rabbit hole style conversations. So I just thought it was appropriate to kind of name the cocktail rabbit hole. It has nothing to do with coffee whatsoever. But for the rabbit hole cocktail, and this is a lot of stuff, so bear with me. Take note. All of these recipes get published on Instagram. I publish the full recipes with the garnish, really pretty pictures, usually by no later than Monday, but sometimes Tuesday if I get a little distracted. And if for some reason you can't access Instagram, please just reach out to me and I'll send you the recipes personally. But so for this cocktail, we are going to put in a ½ ounce of reposado tequila. Then we're going to use a ½ ounce of rye whiskey. And I'm using a really interesting rye whiskey that I got for Christmas. It's by the distillery Savage and Cook. This one's called Lip Service. I really like it. It's just really, really nice. Plus a bottle super cool. But it's one of those things that I probably wouldn't have picked up on my own. But now that someone bought it for me and I've had the chance to taste it without having to honestly pay for it and not be certain, I'm totally buy this. Because I do want to say, I think the bottle runs about between $45 and $55 at the market, which isn't crazy. But sometimes I just get a little antsy spending $50 without knowing what I'm getting into. So if you have seen it, noticed it on the shelf, wanted to try it, I do recommend it. It's very nice. We're also going to use Montenegro Amaro liqueur, yet another bitter Italian liqueur. We're going to use a 3/4 ounce of this. And two of the notes that really shine in Montenegro are eucalyptus and lemon. So I'm still kind of putting a little bit of that lemon play in here, just a little more subtly. got our Montenegro. And then I have this really neat product that a friend of mine makes called Spiced Demerara syrup. It's from a cocktail company or a company called Cocktail and Sons. You can make your own Demerara simple syrup. This one has spices added to it. It says baking spices and peppercorns. When I tried this for the first time, it just really made me think gingerbread and ginger snap cookies. Not that it's very holiday-esque, it just has this real rich quality to it that's really nice. So we're going to use a 1/2 ounce of our Demerara, and I know that sounds like a lot, especially because I said I was trying to make a cocktail that really brought forward like the best cold cup of black coffee you could have. But trust me, it's not going to be a sweet cocktail. What's coming through in the Demerara are all these beautiful spices that people at Cocktail and Sons put into it. So now we're going to do our bitters. We're going to do a combination. We're going to do 1 dash of orange. We're going to do 1 dash of Angostura bitters. And we're going to add some saline solution. Salt is also not something that we always think about when it comes to coffee. However, I tried this cocktail with and without the salt, and the salt does something really interesting with this. When you do this without the salt, the flavor is really nice. It is a beautiful cocktail, but somehow the salt pulls everything apart while letting it stay together. So what I mean by that is with the salt in the cocktail, it allows you to perceive all the flavors individually on your tongue and then the cocktail, instead of the cocktail itself only and then trying to find the flavors you're actually tasting. So my saline solution, I'm going to use 2 drops. We did a class a while back, I want to say about a month ago now, where we did a whole bunch of DIYs for the bar, how to make your own homemade grenadine, your tinctures, your bitters, saline solutions. So if you don't know how to make that, please reference that class. It's very, very simple. And then we're going to use 3 ounces of coffee. And then for this one, I am using the Elite Dark Roast that I brewed in my mocha pot on my stove. So it'd be the equivalent of making an espresso. You just need 3 ounces, so that's pretty large espresso. All right, so now we have all that in there. It's quite a bit of ingredients. It's a lot of stuff. But we're gonna add our ice. Just remember, you want to keep a tight grip on your cocktail shaker, especially when you have a cocktail with this amount of liquid, just because you don't want it to fly open and then have coffee. We're going to shake for about 10 to 20 seconds, give or take. Kind of depends on your ice cube. I'm going to shoot for right in the middle of about 15. All right. And for this particular cocktail, we're not putting any ice in here. This one's going to be served up. And I'm going to double strain it. Now, my favorite thing about this cocktail, and I'll show you guys, when you first serve it or pour it up, it's going to seem very monotone one color. And then it slowly starts to have the foam sip to the top, much like a Guinness. It's like watching a Guinness settle. It's really, really beautiful. Okay. Let me see if you guys can see that separation and that ombre going. Look how pretty that is. Dark to light brown to this creamy foam on top. And then for the garnish, because that foam settles nice and creamy, we're just going to set a few little coffee beans on top. See if I have careful enough placement. Oh, that one fell right in. It's fine. This will just do it organically then instead of a nice little shape. Oh, there's always a way to save a cocktail. I was going to do a cute little clover in the middle, but now we just have scattered coffee beans. But that, my guys, is the rabbit hole. Cheers. Oh my gosh, this coffee is so good. Out of all of the ones I've made, this is my favorite just because this is probably one I could drink every day. probably not a great idea. This one has a lot of coffee in it. So just be careful if you are going to make these coffee cocktails at home. Pace yourself. You don't have to do all of them in the same day, depending on what your caffeine tolerance is. I would like you to take it easy. I don't want anybody having a heart attack out there. So also try these with decaf. That works really well too. Or swap out the coffee for like any kind of your flavored black tea that you like and see how that goes. But yeah, that concludes our class today. And it was pretty quick, but we're fast in drinking coffee. So I'm going to buzz off to go do the rest of my day. I hope y'all will tune in on next Sunday when I think we'll be doing Galliano cocktails. We have some interesting stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks. Some chemistry is involved in some of the classes. We're going to review some classics. We're going to play with some bottles that get stuck on the back bar, such as Galliano. So if you also have any other ideas or anything in particular you'd like to see me work with, please reach out and let me know. I love the feedback. It helps me stay creative. It gives me some kind of inspiration. But yeah, enjoy the rest of y'all's guys. This is Sunday and Labor Day weekend. And I'll see you when I see you.